Tell me, Daniel, how does it feel knowing she picked me instead of you? Mark's voice cracked like a whip across the barroom, slicing through the laughter and the jukebox twang. Heads turned, glasses froze mid-air. A few half-drunk guys at the pool table whistled low, nudging each other, hungry for spectacle. And right beside him, right where I didn't want her, Rachel's eyes darted to the floor, her cheeks blooming red, though not nearly as red as mine. I wanted to disappear, but the thing about humiliation is it doesn't let you. It pins you under a spotlight you never asked for. I cleared my throat, steadying my voice though it burned, and said quietly, "My name's Daniel Carter. I'm 43, born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm not going to forget this." The words came out straighter than I felt, and if anyone noticed the flicker in my eyes, they'd never guess the truth. That I had one card, one secret advantage, sitting quiet in my back pocket, invisible to everyone in that room. Mark smirked, raising his beer bottle in a mock toast, the overhead lights catching his teeth. "She made the right call," he said, slinging an arm around Rachel's shoulders as if I were nothing but a memory. The crowd chuckled. Even the bartender cracked a grin before turning away, pretending to polish glasses. And me? I just stood there, nails digging crescents into my palms, hearing the scrape of my pride being dragged across the floor. There's a certain kind of silence that follows shame. It isn't empty, it's filled with the judgment of every set of eyes. I caught sight of an old man at the end of the bar shaking his head, as if my failure reminded him of his own. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered, "Damn." And Rachel finally looked up, her mouth parting like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. That cut worse than the jeers. I could have swung at Mark. My knuckles twitched with the urge. But violence in that moment would have given him what he wanted. Proof that I was unhinged, lesser, a man cracking under the weight of losing. Instead I did the harder thing, I smiled. A broken, thin smile that wasn't for him, wasn't for her, wasn't for anyone but me. People will always mistake quiet endurance for weakness. But I've learned, silence is where revenge plants its roots. Before we get deeper into this story, make sure you're subscribed, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from. I left the bar without finishing my drink, but I carried something heavier than whiskey with me. Outside, the night air hit sharp against my skin. The neon sign flickered above like a mocking laugh. I leaned against my truck, staring at the hood ornament Rachel once called Old Faithful, the same truck I'd driven her home in 1,000 times. And in my head, I heard my father's voice words he used to mutter when life spit in his face. "Every wound's a ledger. Balance it one day, or it will balance you." I thought about balance while the cold seeped into my bones. Mark had balance in spades tonight. He had her hand, the crowd's laughter, and the upper hand of betrayal. But ledgers don't stay tilted forever. Rachel loved peach pie. That's what stabbed deepest as I stood there, remembering Thanksgiving 3 years ago when she told me it was her favorite, and I drove across 2 counties to buy one from a farm stand still open late. The pie had been our thing ever since, a small symbol of care, of love, of tradition. Tonight I imagined her sharing a slice of it with him, letting him feed her forkfuls in the same kitchen where I once did. That thought alone twisted the knife deeper. But I filed it away. Symbols matter. They're anchors. They're weapons too if you know how to wield them. I slid into the truck, fingers trembling as I jammed the key in the ignition. I didn't cry. I don't remember the last time I let myself, but the heat behind my eyes was worse. Shame hardens into anger if you let it simmer long enough, and I knew I'd let this simmer. The road home was black ribbon, headlights carving out narrow certainty. Every red light felt like mockery, every green light like a dare. I gripped the wheel, whispering to myself, "Don't brake, not yet." Not in the small ways. Brake later, in the way that counts. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flicked on, automatic and too bright. The house felt hollow as I entered. Her coffee mug was still in the sink, lipstick smudge on the rim. My jacket still hung next to hers on the coat rack, like nothing had changed. That's the cruelest part of betrayal, how normal everything looks after it detonates. I poured myself a drink, bourbon this time, neat. Sat at the kitchen table staring at the wood grain, tracing lines like a roadmap to somewhere darker. And then I opened my phone. That's when I saw it, Mark's latest post. A photo of him and Rachel, cheek to cheek, his caption reading, "Sometimes life gives you exactly what you deserve." 200 likes. A dozen comments congratulating them. A handful of mutual friends chiming in, acting like I was already a footnote. I screenshotted it. Not out of masochism, out of necessity. Proof is oxygen when planning revenge. A man can survive betrayal, but he cannot survive invisibility. That night, I sat in silence until the bourbon ran out. And as the clock crawled past midnight, I wrote one sentence in the back of an old notebook I kept in the drawer. He humiliated me in public. I will return the favor louder, sharper, permanent. When I closed my eyes, the humiliation replayed in high definition. Mark's grin, Rachel's silence, the laughter behind me. But in the edges of the replay, I also saw the secret I hadn't revealed. The advantage still mine alone, tucked away like a blade no one knows I'm holding. And though the night swallowed me whole, I whispered to it, "This isn't the end, it's the rehearsal." The rehearsal ended when the sun cracked pale across the blinds, painting stripes across my face like prison bars, and I told myself I wouldn't be the inmate in this story. I showered, shaved, dressed like it was any other Monday, but the mirror reflected a man rehearsing calm while rage hummed under his skin. At work, the office smelled of burnt coffee and fluorescent hum, everyone shuffling papers, pretending they had control. I sat at my desk, nodding at coworkers, while inside I was replaying the bar scene frame by frame, cataloging every smirk, every whisper, every pair of eyes that saw me buckle and did nothing. The humiliation wasn't fading, it was fermenting, turning into something sharper. Rachel showed up around noon. Not at my desk. She wouldn't dare, but across the floor, walking in with Mark, hand brushing his arm as if I'd been erased. They were laughing at something only they shared. My stomach knotted, but I forced myself to keep typing, the keyboard clacking like gunfire. If anger could leave scorch marks, my desk would have been ash. When our eyes finally met, hers lingered too long. A flicker of guilt, maybe, or maybe just curiosity, how much of me was left to break? Mark, on the other hand, smirked the way men do when they think they've already won. He dropped a file on my desk without a word, just a glance that said, "Carry my weight like you always have." And I did because revenge isn't served by walking out. It's served by staying in the kitchen long enough to poison the meal. I buried myself in the project he'd pawned off, but my mind kept darting to the notebook at home. I'd filled 2 more lines last night before finally collapsing. He believes people forget humiliation. He doesn't understand memory is the sharpest weapon. At 3 o'clock, an email landed in my inbox, a team announcement. Mark had been promoted, effective immediately. He hadn't even told me, though we'd worked side by side for 10 years. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere, not even in the footnotes. That was the nail in the coffin of subtlety. Not only had he taken Rachel, he'd climbed over me in daylight, using my work as his ladder. The office buzzed with fake congratulations, people slapping his back, laughing too loudly. He played the humble act, hands up, pretending he hadn't seen it coming. Rachel beamed beside him, like a trophy on display. I sat still, clenching my jaw until I thought my teeth would shatter. The moment burned itself into me, a brand that said, "You are invisible until you make them see you." But here's the thing about promotions, they come with paperwork. And paperwork, I knew better than anyone, always leaves cracks if you read close enough. That night, I stayed late under the pretense of finishing reports. The building emptied, footsteps fading, the janitor's mop squeaking down the hall. When the silence settled, I slipped into the records folder on my computer, searching for Mark's contract addendum. He was careless, always assuming I'd cover the details. And there it was, a clause requiring non-fraternization with subordinates, highlighted from HR's template, tucked like a landmine he hadn't noticed. Rachel's name was still officially listed under his team, a small oversight. A technicality. But small things can bring down empires if you pull at the right thread. I copied the file to my drive, heart thumping. Proof doesn't shout, it whispers, but it whispers loud enough in the right ear. Driving home, headlights slicing the dark, I kept thinking about the ledger. My father's words rolled around in my skull. Balance doesn't come easy. You've got to carve it out yourself. At home, I opened a beer, sat at the kitchen table, and started scrolling my phone again. That's when I saw the photo Rachel herself had posted. Her hand in Mark's, captioned, "Sometimes love surprises you when you least expect it." She tagged him, of course, and me, not a word. The comments rolled in hearts. Congratulations, someone from high school saying, "Finally." I screenshotted that too. Then I zoomed in. On her wrist was the bracelet I'd given her for Christmas. The one etched with "Always yours." I remembered the way she cried when I fastened it on, said she'd never take it off. The irony made my stomach churn. But irony too is a weapon if you know how to twist it. Sleep didn't come easy. When it finally did, it brought a dream. Me standing in the same bar, same crowd, but this time the laughter was mine. Mark's grin had vanished, Rachel's eyes wide with shame, and the whole room watching him collapse under the weight of exposure. I woke with my fists clenched and sheets damp with sweat. The next morning, I walked into the office with something I hadn't carried in weeks: control. Not victory yet, that was distant, but the knowledge of the crack in his armor, the technicality that could ruin him. He strutted past me, oblivious, already planning his next power move. Rachel gave me another glance, longer this time, like she sensed something stirring in me she hadn't expected. Guilt, curiosity, fear, I couldn't tell. But she knew I wasn't broken, not completely. At lunch, I overheard them. They were in the break room, voices low but not low enough. "He's not handling it well," Rachel murmured. "I feel bad." Mark cut her off, chuckling. "Don't. He's a grown man. If he can't handle losing, that's his problem. Besides, he was holding you back." Those words, "holding you back," snapped inside me like dry kindling catching flame. I nearly walked in, nearly told him to choke on his arrogance. But I didn't, because fire uncontrolled burns the wrong things. Better to aim it. Better to wait. That evening, instead of driving home, I drove past the bar. The neon sign blinked like a dare. I parked, went inside, ordered a beer, and sat alone at the same table where I'd been humiliated. The place smelled of fried food and cheap cologne. A football game played on the TV, guys shouting at the screen. Normal life went on, indifferent to my storm. But as I sipped, I imagined what it would feel like to walk in here with proof, with a story louder than Mark's, one that would flip the crowd's laughter back on him. Symbols matter. That's when it hit me. The pie. Peach pie. Our tradition, twisted now, soured. What if the very symbol of what he'd stolen became the instrument of his undoing? The thought lingered, vague but potent, like smoke before fire. I left before the game ended, the noise behind me. Outside, the air was cold and damp, headlights cutting streaks in the rain. I gripped the steering wheel, whispering to myself, "You don't win by being faster. You win by being patient enough to watch them trip over their own feet." The patience was killing me, but the trap was starting to form. Patience is an art most men abandon too early, but I wore it like armor. Every day at work, another step in the quiet march toward balance. The documents I'd copied sat safe on a hidden drive, a whisper of a weapon waiting for the right stage. And yet, it wasn't enough to end him in silence. I wanted the theater of it, the spectacle. Revenge without an audience is just anger, with a different coat on. Mark strutted deeper into his promotion like a man convinced the world existed to applaud him. Meetings became his stage, Rachel his sidekick, me the ghost laboring in the background. He'd spit ideas half-baked, and I'd refine them quietly while he preened in front of the board. Every fake laugh from executives grated. Every pat on his back was another nail in a coffin I was building with meticulous hands. But cracks always widen if you tap the right spots. One afternoon, I overheard him barking at Rachel in his new office, door half closed. "Don't question me in front of them again," he hissed. "You're not here to outshine me." Her silence followed like a dog kicked too hard. She emerged moments later, eyes glassy, pretending she'd just been on a call. I caught her glance across the hall, not pity, not guilt, but something else. Something like recognition. Maybe she finally saw the arrogance I'd lived with for years. That night, alone at my kitchen table, I opened the notebook again. My scrawl had grown harsher with each entry. Public humiliation is the stage. Peach pie is the prop. The clause is the trap. The screenshot is the chorus. The plan was stitching itself together, thread by thread, tighter with every day. The internet is a cruel mirror, but it's also a stage if you know how to use it. I created a new account, anonymous, seeded with a believable backstory. I started small, liking their posts, commenting vaguely supportive things, building trust in silence. Then I began following coworkers, weaving myself into the fabric of their digital world. Every like, every emoji, every comment laid a trail that seemed harmless. No one suspects the quiet observer until the quiet turns into a shout. Weeks passed, and I waited. Then came the company banquet. Suits, dresses, wine glasses clinking, the kind of night where everyone wanted to be seen. Mark arrived late, Rachel at his arm, and the room tilted toward them like they were gravity itself. I stayed at the edge, nursing a drink, eyes scanning the stage where speeches would be made. When his name was called, applause erupted, cameras flashing as he took the microphone. He talked about teamwork, about growth, about leadership, words I'd fed him over the years like breadcrumbs. He didn't mention me once. He didn't have to. The emission was louder than acknowledgement. But I wasn't watching him. I was watching Rachel. She smiled, clapped, but her eyes were restless, scanning the room like she was waiting for something. For me, maybe. For a crack to open, I felt the ledger shift an inch in my chest. The next morning, I sent an anonymous email to HR, simple, clean. A screenshot of the contract clause, attached with a recent photo of Mark and Rachel at a company event, his arm tight around her waist, her employee badge still visible on her dress. No commentary, no flourish, just facts. The kind of facts that choke a man when the timing's right. I didn't need to wait long. Within days, whispers slithered through the office. HR meetings behind closed doors, blinds drawn, faces tight. Mark's swagger dimmed, just a flicker, but I noticed. Rachel kept her head down, moving faster between tasks, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I could almost hear the rope tightening, but I wanted more than quiet HR discipline. I wanted the roar, the public unmasking. That's when I remembered the pie. Peach pie sweetness turned bitter, love turned weapon. I called the diner Rachel and I used to frequent, one with pies that tasted like home. I ordered one, special made, picked it up on a Friday evening. That weekend, I knew Mark and Rachel would be at the same bar where everything began. They were creatures of habit, too smug to imagine avoiding the scene of the crime. I walked in first, pie box under my arm, ordered a beer, waited. Sure enough, they showed an hour later, laughter trailing them. The crowd noticed, eyes turning the way they always did. I stood calm as stone and crossed the room. Brought you something, I said, placing the pie box on their table. Mark raised an eyebrow, smirk twitching back to life. Rachel froze, her lips parting like a prayer left unsaid. I flipped the lid open, the golden crust, sugar dusted, perfect. A knife lay inside, tucked neatly across the pie. You always said peach pie was tradition, I murmured, just loud enough for those near to hear. I figured you'd want to share it. The crowd went silent, watching, sensing blood in the water. Mark reached for bravado. Cute, trying to bribe us back into your sad little world? His voice cracked slightly on sad, and I heard the first real tremor of fear. I leaned close, my whisper sharp enough to cut. Check your inbox. He blinked, pulled out his phone. And there it was, the email forwarded to him from HR, his face drained color, lips tightening as he scrolled. Rachel glanced over, eyes widening when she realized what he was reading. Murmurs rippled through the bar. Phones came out, screenshots spread. Someone muttered, "Oh, damn," while another chuckled low. For the first time, Mark wasn't the one commanding the room. He was the one under the spotlight, cracking. I watched his shoulders stiffen, his jaw twitch. Rachel's hand slipped from his, falling to the table like a severed cord. The laughter began not loud at first, but sharp, cutting. A reversal, a mirror. And in that sound, I felt the ledger balance another inch, but it wasn't finished. Not yet. Revenge half-served tastes like ash. I picked up the pie knife, set it gently on the table in front of him. Cut yourself a slice, I said softly, so only he and Rachel could hear. Taste what betrayal feels like. He didn't move. Couldn't. The crowd pressed closer, phones raised, every angle recorded. Rachel stared at the pie, tears pooling but unshed. I stepped back, savoring the silence before the storm, knowing this was just the prelude. The real collapse was still coming, bigger, louder, irreversible. The noose was nearly tight enough. All I had to do was pull. Mark's silence stretched too long, and in a room full of drunk men and restless women, silence is just another way of bleeding. The bar buzzed with whispers, phones glowing like fireflies, every eye trained on him as he sat frozen, knife untouched, pie untouched, face pale like someone had cut the power. Rachel shifted in her chair, lips trembling, and when she finally spoke, it wasn't to defend him. You told me no one would ever find out, she whispered. The words weren't quiet enough, they carried. The crowd gasped. That was the snap, the sound of a rope breaking at last. Mark shot her a glare, sharp enough to slice, but too late. Whispers erupted into laughter, jeers, phones filming closer. Man got caught. Someone shouted. A guy near the jukebox whistled like it was halftime at a game. And I stood there, steady, my humiliation reborn as spectacle, his arrogance crumbling grain by grain. He slammed his fist on the table, voice breaking. This doesn't mean anything. A chart can't prove, but even as he spoke, his phone pinged again. Another email. This time from the company itself. Effective immediately, Mark Whitaker suspended pending investigation. The notification glowed bright enough for the nearest bystanders to read over his shoulder. A cheer went up like a touchdown scored. I didn't send that second email. HR had moved faster than I thought, seizing the evidence I'd planted like a live grenade. My advantage had worked, and now the blast was public. Rachel pushed back her chair, hands trembling. She didn't look at him. She looked at me. For the first time since the night at the bar, she saw me not as the broken man, not as the shadow, but as the architect of balance. Her lips parted like she wanted to explain, to reach for some scrap of forgiveness. I gave her nothing. Silence can be mercy, but sometimes silence is the cruelest blade. Mark lunged to his feet, knife clattering to the floor. He pointed at me, spit flying. You think this makes you better than me? You think this circus changes the fact she chose me? His voice cracked on chose, desperation unraveling his edges. He wanted the crowd back, wanted the stage, but he no longer had control of the spotlight. I stepped closer, pie still sitting perfect on the table between us, a symbol sharpened to a blade. She didn't choose you, I said calmly, voice low but carrying. She chose a performance, and now the curtain's down. Phones caught it. They always do. Within hours, the video was online. Mark's meltdown, Rachel's betrayal hanging in the air, me walking away steady while the bar roared around us. Comments flooded in. Sympathy, applause, jokes about peach pie becoming the new symbol of karma. My inbox lit with messages from old friends, coworkers, even strangers. Saw the video. Damn, man, respect. But victory is never clean. The morning after, I sat at my kitchen table with coffee gone cold, scrolling through the viral clip on repeat. Every angle, every meme, every edit of Mark's breakdown. Justice had teeth, but it also had a strange emptiness. The ledger was balanced, yes, but the cost was everything I'd once loved. Rachel was gone. My reputation at work was scorched earth, even if I came out the survivor. And inside me, something hollowed out where love had once lived. That Monday, the office was a morgue of whispers. Mark's name was mud, his desk cleared by security. Rachel hadn't shown. People avoided my eyes, not out of contempt this time, but out of fear, like they'd just learned what I was capable of. It felt less like respect, more like distance, and maybe that's the price. Balance never comes free. By noon, Rachel appeared. Not with Mark, he was gone, but alone, pale, clutching a folder like it was armor. She stopped at my desk. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she placed the folder down. His severance package, she whispered. They wanted me to handle it. I didn't know what he was until too late. I looked at her, really looked. The woman I'd once loved, the woman who'd burned me alive with silence, now standing there trembling, hollow-eyed. I could have reached out, could have comforted her, could have let forgiveness heal what revenge had cut open. Instead, I pushed the folder back across the desk without opening it. Some debts don't get forgiven, I said quietly. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She nodded once, turned, and walked away. I watched her go, not with anger anymore, but with the kind of emptiness that comes after a storm clears and leaves the land bare. That night, I drove back to the bar one last time. Ordered coffee instead of whiskey, sat alone in the same corner where humiliation first carved its name into me. The jukebox played some old Springsteen track. Men laughed at the pool table. Life carried on like nothing had happened. But I felt older than I had weeks before, aged by fire. I pulled out the notebook, flipped to the last page, and wrote, balance achieved, cost, everything. Lesson, trust is pie. Sweet once, bitter when spoiled, best never served twice. I closed it, slid it into my jacket, and walked out into the night. Some wounds don't heal. They calcify, become bone, part of the structure holding you upright. That's the truth most men never admit. Survival isn't about staying whole, it's about learning to carry what broke you. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this. Betrayal carves you hollow, revenge fills the space for a while, but wisdom is realizing neither will make you whole. Sometimes the only justice left is walking away heavier, scarred, but standing tall enough that no one ever mistakes your silence for weakness again. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. It helps us share more true stories like this.